powerful organization which, if we just look at some of the directors, we get an idea of the power of this organization. Walter Lippmann, Adlai Stevenson, Cyrus Vance, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Robert O. Anderson, Paul Volcker, who used to head the Federal Reserve, Theodore M. Hesburgh, Lane Kirkland, who was in the unions, as I recall, George H.W. Bush, Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, George Shultz, Alan Greenspan, who currently
I was going to say Greenspan. I said Greenspan's got to be in on that too. He is the highest-ranking economist in the United States, the one that everybody goes to.
Brent Scowcroft, Gene Kirkpatrick, and Richard B. Cheney, who was we saw him a lot during the Kuwait War.
Recognize so many of those names.
Yes, and the most powerful man in the Council on Foreign Relations has been David Rockefeller. But you see, their effort was to establish the United Nations, to bring the United States into the United Nations. When the United States did not go into the League of Nations, it was a major setback for Illuminized Masonry. And so they decided to take a little different attack. And this time, the Council on Foreign Relations, which overwhelmingly propagandizes the global concept, made it much more convenient for the United States by establishing the United Nations on United States soil. And so that stage began developing with the United Nations. Now, we know what role the United Nations played in the Kuwait scenario and the overall picture of a new world order.
But, Bob, we can see, okay, so all this has happened in our country, and our governmental leadership has caved into this, or been led as the Pied Piper led the rats out of the city into all of this stuff of the judgment. But what does that have to do with the Seventh-day Adventist Corporation?
We'll come to that in a little bit.
You're laying the foundation.
Well, we have to know what's happening strategically in the whole world, and then we'll see what is happening within our church. For instance, here's study number 7. This is page 33 of this book. A Council on Foreign Relations position paper published on November 25th, 1959. The CFR stated that its purpose was to advocate the building of a new international order which may be responsible to world aspirations for peace and for social and economic change. An international order including states labeling themselves as socialist or communist. The term New World Order or New International Order has been used privately by the CFR since its inception to describe the coming world government. However, since the fall of 1990, the Council on Foreign Relations members have for the first time begun using the term publicly to condition the public for what lies ahead. You notice how we started hearing that a lot in 1990. If the American people hear the term often enough before the world government is formed, it is hoped they will be less likely to resist the effort or feel threatened by it when that day arrives. It's happened the same way with celebration.
Absolutely.
Some places you have the celebration term for years before the actual thing comes in.
Our church was conditioned with that term by magazines, by periodicals that's showing up everywhere in the Sabbath school lesson, in the guides, in the Insight, in the Adventist Review. We were seeing celebration everywhere because our people had to be conditioned to accept the term.
Right. And that's exactly what's happening on a global basis. See, in the book of Revelation, the global picture is there. The New World Order, it should be explained, is an expression that has been used by Illuminized Freemasonry since the days of Weishaupt. He's the one that established the Illuminati.
Right.
To signify the coming world government over which the Antichrist would come to rule once it had been built. One of Illuminized Freemasonry's secret symbols portraying this message was placed on the back of our dollar bill during the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt was himself a 33rd degree Mason.
I've heard that.
Now, it's my understanding from the 33rd degree on up, the Roman Catholic Church controls the Masons. You see, this is very fascinating because here you have an organization which most people think is anti-Catholic. And people from the Protestant churches and the world at large join this. They want to be in with the club or the group in their locale.
Now, the Catholic equivalent to this is the Knights of Columbus, right?
The Knights of Columbus are a special order designed to bring America under the control of the papacy. In fact, John, I got a year or two ago, I got a 3-volume set on the Knights of Columbus put out by the Roman Catholic Church. And in the first few pages, it stated that one of the primary goals of the Knights of Columbus was to change the history books in America to reflect the Roman Catholic concept.
You are kidding me.
History.
They come right out and say that?
It's right in the beginning.
See, this is exactly what I deal with in my evangelistic series. When we deal with all of this stuff about the papacy, I say, folks, you won't find this in your history books. It's been expunged for the last 20, 30 years out of our history books, and our history books have been changed. But I never realized that this is just blatantly endorsed by the Knights of Columbus, that this is what they have set out to do, is to change our history books.
One of the major objectives.
I mean, they are just so crass. I mean, they are just right out in the open. They don't even try to hide what they are out to do.
Now, we'll see how all that ties in with the Masons and the New Age movement shortly here. Roosevelt was a 33rd degree Mason and a close associate of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Masonic symbol consists of a pyramid with the all-seeing eye of Osiris or Baal above it. Underneath the pyramid is written Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means the New Order of the Ages, or the New World Order in Latin. It was designed, the symbol was designed by Masonic interests, became the official reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States in 1782. And then, of course, 150 years later, was put on our $1 Federal Reserve note. At the time the seal was designed, the New World Order was still in the early stages of being built and was not yet complete. This is symbolized by the capstone being separated from the rest of the pyramid. However, once the New World Order has been built and the one world government is in place, the capstone will be joined to the rest of the pyramid, symbolizing the completion of the task. Now, incidentally, this Gary Kaw came across, after he went to a speaking appointment, he came across an old lady who came up to him after he spoke at a certain meeting, and she said, I have been gathering books on the Masons from widows of Masons who have died for 20 years. Would you be interested? And so he spent months and months going through. I mean, he really delved into this material. Now, dropping down, the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations was to influence all aspects of society in such a way that one day Americans would wake up and find themselves in the midst of a one-world system, whether they liked it or not. Their hope was to get Americans to the point where entering a world government would seem as natural and American as baseball and apple pie.
How many years they've been trying to do this? 200 years?
Since the Masons have been working on it, sure.
It's been right here on our $1 bill the whole time.
Right.
I had no idea that these Latin words on the back were
New World Order.
New World
New
Order.
Order of the Ages. Or
New Order of the Ages or New World Order. Right there, printed in Latin, right on the back of our dollar bill.
Right.
You can see their strategy. You can see what the Jesuit agenda has been for hundreds of years now.
The Jesuits plan strategy. They are the military strategists, and they use other orders to accomplish it, their goals. And it's not hard to imagine that they would use the Knights of Malta, who are in the highest echelons of the York Rite of the Masonic order.
You see, the thing that is coming as such a shock to our people is that we expect our nation to do this, but we never expected the conference to do this. We never expected our church leadership to do this. We never expected the Seventh-day Adventist Corporation to be a part of this. That's what's absolutely blowing away our Adventist people, is to see how that our church leadership is now a part of this.
Well, there's a lot more to come on this, John, and how the things that are coming in our ranks are all part of this overall picture. The Council on Foreign Relations control of the State Department ensured the U.S. membership in the United Nations following the war. And so the Council, see how it goes step by step, stage by stage. And then the UN was established in 1945, and we have other groups now that began asserting themselves toward a new world order. The Bilderbergers is one group, approximately 100 power elite from the member nations of NATO. Its membership is interlocked with that of the Council on Foreign Relations. Incidentally, this is all documented in this book. I'm reading from page 38. The Trilateral Commission was an offspring of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome, each designed to carry out a specific task within the broader mission of establishing a new world order. So here the Council on Foreign Relations is a springboard for the Bilderbergers, who would be a NATO element working for a new world order, the Club of Rome, and the Trilateral Commission. All were to each have their own specific tasks. The creation of these new organizations would represent a mere restructuring of the one world political hierarchy, which is always changing, revising, adapting itself to current situations to further its agenda. Now notice that the hierarchy, among other things, had called for world government to be achieved in stages through the forming of world administrative regions. This is in accordance with the UN Charter. And the countries of the world would be merged into several regions to break down concepts of national sovereignty. Now, I want to get a book here, if we haven't brought it over already, John.
So what you're saying is that what they are trying to do is to break down individual loyalties to our countries and just give regions of the world and break down this fierce patriotism that each of us have for our individual countries. They have to do away with that first. And isn't that this? Oh, I'm probably getting ahead of you. But isn't this the same concept that they're trying to use now with churches? This loyalty to our churches, to where we're just all one big church, all together under the banner of Christ, and get away from these individual doctrines and just all come together in unity. That's exactly what they're trying to do in the world.
Malachi Martin brings out how John Paul II's strategy is to eliminate these national boundaries and create a one-world government under the control
and they've got to do the same
of the
thing
papacy.
with the church. Get away from all these boundaries of the different churches and different doctrines and just come together in unity. Exactly the same Jesuit concept.
Right. Now, the overriding purpose of the Bilderbergers, like its sister organizations, the Council on Foreign Relations and the United Nations, is the establishment of a world government. And the Club of Rome is another interesting aspect of this. Another organization that has drawn a high percentage of its members from the Council on Foreign Relations is the Club of Rome. It claims to be an informal organization of less than 100 people who are, in their own words, scientists, educators, economists, humanists, industrialists, and national and international civil servants. Included among these have been the members of the Rockefeller family. The Club of Rome has been charged with the task of overseeing the regionalization and unification of the entire world. The club could therefore be said to be one step above the Bilderbergers in the one-world hierarchy. The Club of Rome's founder, Pequet, has been a close associate of the Bilderbergers. As far as I have been able to determine, says Gary Kaw, most of the directives for the planning of the world government are presently coming from the Club of Rome. Now notice the document here that the club released, entitled Regionalized and Adaptive Model of the Global World System, prepared by the Club of Rome's members, reveals that the club has divided the world into 10 political economic regions, which it refers to as kingdoms. Now I thought that was fascinating,
What if I
Tom.
heard something like that?
Revelation 17 is
Revelation 17?
because it says there they have not yet received the status of kingdoms as yet. The Trilateral Commission. During the 50s and 60s, the same congressional leaders who had been campaigning against the Federal Reserve System began to expose the Council on Foreign Relations, and then eventually they found out about the Trilateral Commission. Now, the Trilateral Commission is a three-based, trilaterally based system, which has United States as one base, Europe as another, and Japan as another. Now, their job is to interlock the nations economically.
Which has already happened.
All right, and what happened? I mean, how did it happen? They used the Arabs to create the oil crisis. Remember that in the early
72, 73. Yeah.
All right, and there was a oil embargo. Now you could say, well, you know, the Islamic philosophy or Islamic religion brought all of the Arabs together to do this, but it had never been able to accomplish that before for them. But the Rockefellers could, through the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, they were able to induce the Arabs to have an oil embargo, and at the same time the Japanese had the small cars ready to go, and Americans bought the small cars, and thus, as Gary Kaw points out here, the interlocking of the world economically took place at a far faster rate than any of the people who had engineered this had ever dreamed.
Yeah.
The globalists never thought that it would happen as fast as it did. The purpose of the Trilateral Commission would be to promote world government by encouraging economic interdependence among the superpowers. Now, just look at what we hear on the news all the time. Interdependence, economic interdependence. We're hearing that term all the time now. Steering the economies of the member nations into a position where they would be completely intertwined, the Trilateral Commission augments the regionalization efforts of its sister organizations, the Bilderbergers and the Club of Rome. Rockefeller's main accomplice in this endeavor would be Zbigniew Brzezinski, who drafted the Commission's charter and went on to become the organization's first director. Incidentally, this is page 45. It's all footnoted here.
Now, isn't Brzezinski the one that was in the Carter administration?
Yes.
Sure.
Brzezinski, who would later become Jimmy Carter's national security advisor,
Right.
wrote several books detailing his worldview. In one of these books,
security advisor. Oh boy.
yes, in one of these books entitled Between Two Ages, written in 1970, Brzezinski calls for a new international monetary system and prepares the reader for the acceptance of a global taxation system.
Do you see God holding back the four winds of strife, Bob, until the servants of God are sealed in their forehead? Don't you see that taking place? That all of this was in place, could have happened years ago, but God has been holding back the winds of strife for his people to be sealed. And God is pleading, and God is using all of these, people like you and I and the independent ministries that are willing to stand up and be counted and to shake our people and say, wake up! Don't you see that it's time for God's people to be sealed in their foreheads? We are going to make the decision of either being eternally saved or eternally lost at this moment.
That's right. That's right. Now, Brzezinski, interestingly, favored the writings of the French Jesuit priest Teilhard de Chardin. Now, we talked about him in our
last video.
Jesuit Agenda 1. He is the most influential figure in the New Age movement. Deceased now, but his writings live on. And Brzezinski was very interested in Teilhard's message, and the Trilateral Commission became a virtual carbon copy of the Council on Foreign Relations. So by the 70s and 80s, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission had become exceedingly powerful in our government affairs. It had become impossible or difficult to ignore. And Congressman Larry McDonald took the matter before Congress on February 4, 1981, calling for a comprehensive congressional investigation of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, following up Resolution 773 of the American Legion, which urged Congress to investigate these organizations to determine their influence on U.S. policy. You remember Korean Airlines 007?
Well, sure. When the Russians shot it down?
Do you know what the congressman's name was that was on board?
Oh, I don't remember his name, but I remember hearing that he was in the middle of some investigation or something.
That was it. That was the investigation. He did everything humanly possible to expose the plot right up until his death aboard the Korean airliner in 1983.
What was his name?
The 007 McDonald.
Oh, that was Larry McDonald that was killed.
Yeah.
Oh.
See, he was pushing for an investigation on the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. The 007 accident backfired on the establishment as it set off a wave of repulsion at the state level. People were infuriated by McDonald's death and the failure of the media to even mention the fact that he had been exposing a conspiracy. Those who were aware that the battle was being waged behind the scenes began to apply pressure on Congress to take action. On April 3rd of 1985, the Indiana House of Representatives introduced Resolution 19, calling for a comprehensive investigation of the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations pursuant to the efforts of Larry McDonald. But there was no media coverage on all of this to speak of. And since McDonald's death, Jesse Helms has become the most outspoken critic of these organizations. And he stated, in one of his speeches, "Mr. President, a careful examination of what is happening behind the scenes reveals that all of these interests are working in concert with the masters of the Kremlin in order to create what some refer to as a new world order. Private organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Trilateral Commission, the Dartmouth Conference, the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, the Atlantic Institute, and the Bilderberger Group serve to disseminate and coordinate the plans for this so-called New World Order in powerful business, financial, academic, and official circles." And he said the principal instrument of this control over the American economy and money is the Federal Reserve System. It was quite a speech, and I'm only citing a few.
This is Jesse Helms' speech?
Jesse Helms, yes. So he kind of took up the torch. He said that we are on the road to economic concentration and political slavery.
Now, he's a senator from North Carolina, right?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right, in the next chapter, Gary Kaw deals with America's shadow government. He says every U.S. ambassador to NATO has been a member of the Council of Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission. Our national defense has been dominated by these people. Every U.S. defense secretary of the past 35 years, with the exception of Clark Clifford, either belonged to the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission. The Defense Department has been under the control of this. Every supreme allied commander in Europe has been a member of the CFR or the TC. He goes on and lists one department after another of our government: the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve. The list goes on, and virtually every area of the military is dominated by members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Then he lists the last 9 presidents with their organizational affiliations: Franklin D. Roosevelt, Masonic Lodge; Harry S. Truman, Masonic Lodge; JFK, CFR; Lyndon B. Johnson, Masonic Lodge; Richard M. Nixon, Council on Foreign Relations; Gerald R. Ford, Jr., Masonic Lodge and Council on Foreign Relations; James E. Carter, Jr., Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission; Ronald Reagan, Masonic Lodge; George Bush, Skull and Bones, Council on Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission. Skull and Bones is a Yale secret organization. So the next step that he points out is the control of this element over the media. Who is involved in the Council on Foreign Relations in the media? CBS, William Paley; Dan Rather, Harry Reasoner; Bill Moyers from NBC; Tom Brokaw, John Chancellor, Marvin Kalb, Irving R. Levine, all on the Council on Foreign Relations.
All flaming liberals.
And from ABC, David Brinkley; John Scully, Barbara Winters; from CNN, Daniel Shore; from Public Broadcast Service, Robert McNeil and Jim Lehrer; and Harding Carter III. So he points out how they have controlled the media, the papers, the takeover of independent newspapers and mergers, and it's quite a portrayal here. Major magazines in the CFR orbit include Fortune, Time, Life, Money, People, and Sports Illustrated, Newsweek, Business Week, U.S. News and World Report, Saturday Review, Reader's Digest, Atlantic Monthly, McCall's, and Harper's Magazine.
Every secular magazine.
They are controlling virtually every aspect of the media. That's why you don't hear certain aspects of the media. It's interesting that this book that I just got yesterday, that I referred to a few minutes ago, Triumph Without Victory, is the unreported history of the Persian Gulf War. The Persian Gulf War was the war probably with one of the least exposure of newspaper reporters to what actually was going on. They had these pools, remember? And the military reporters that fed the information to the media were very skilled in what they were doing, and the media only got what the military wanted, basically. And that's why U.S. News wrote this book. Then public education. He goes into public education and the influence of the Rockefellers and John Dewey's socialist philosophy, and how Dewey had an enormous control over the educators in our country. And he brought in the relativism, the destruction of permanent moral absolutes. He wrote, "There is no room for fixed natural law or permanent moral absolutes." So here is this era of relativism that I mentioned a little while ago, that John Courtney Murray, the Jesuit, told us we have been shifted through. And incidentally, John, I want to get another book here called The Closing of the American Mind. This book is by Professor Alan Bloom, and in it he tells, in the first few pages, of how in the last 50 years our entire educational system has been altered to bring in relativism. He says there is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes or says he believes that truth is relative. And I remember talking to an old friend of mine who is now a dean at one of our academies, and I said to him, what's the difference now between the students that you have in the dorm and what things were like when we were going to school a generation ago? And he said, today the students all believe that truth is relative. Everything is relative. What's right for you may not be right for me.
Doesn't that just stand to reason, since all of our schools have embraced the golden calf of accreditation, and in order to be accredited you have to send your teachers out to be trained in the schools of Babylon, and of course they drink from the sewers of Babylon, come back to our schools and teach it to our students. Those students become our teachers for the next generation. Don't you see how this thing of accreditation that started back in the 20s, we've got to be accredited, we've got to be accredited, and by bowing down to that golden calf of accreditation, look at the harvest that we are reaping from that, what we did 50 years ago.
Well, that's
60,
so true,
years.
John, because, you know, in my generation, I can remember back when the old Protestant absolutes were still dominant in the community that I grew up in as a boy, when I was small.
Right.
And even in our school system. But about in my academy years, at the end of the 60s, the late 60s, this relativism came in like a flood. And along with it, rationalism. Now, I remember when I was at the seminary, I went down one time on a trip to Washington, D.C., and I spoke with a person who is high in the General Conference for about 3 hours about our educational system. And he told me, he said, Bob, he said, virtually our entire educational system now is relying on rationalism instead of faith in the Word of God. And that's exactly what we're describing here. It's exactly what the Jesuits said was the shift that would take place from the old Protestant morality through relativism to break up the divine absolutes and then to bring in ultimately Roman Catholic natural law with a new set of absolutes, namely those of the papacy. And this is exactly what our church is following.
Of course.
As a boy, I remember there was a consensus in our church. There was an agreement about what our mission was, three angels' messages and Mark of the Beast and that type of thing.
It was black and white when I was growing up. Everything was black and white, you know. But now there's just this big gray area, and now people don't know what to believe. Just anything goes.
That's the relativism. What's right for you may not be right for me, you see. And truth is relative, rather than looking at the Word and saying, this is where we find truth. Jewelry wearing is wrong, or, this is wrong and this is right. But that relativism, you see, breaks up the old divine absolutes. What Luther preached was Scripture alone, the sovereignty of God, and the verities of Scripture. It brought about in the people's minds a security because they knew that they were serving an unchanging God, with whom there is no variableness nor shadow of turning. Now, all of that got broken up in Germany long before it did over here, because the main philosopher of our time in the modern era who has promoted this relativism was Hegel. And his ideas caught hold in Germany before they did over here. And you know what it brought about in Germany was Nazism. It destroyed in the people's minds the resistance that they could have to a dictator by relying on the divine absolutes of the law and the Word of God. And then they were prepared for a human dictator.
Exactly what
totalitarianism.
Is happening. Exactly what is happening in the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
As the moral fabric of our Adventist people has deteriorated from a generation going through this relativism, they are now prepared to accept a human tyranny, just like we read there from Nigeria.
You see, the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy have been the foundation of everything that we have believed as Seventh-day Adventists all the time I was growing up. And suddenly, the Spirit of prophecy has been thrown out the window, and the interpretation of Scripture is the evangelical interpretation of Scripture, and everything that I have had as a basis for religion in my years of growing up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church have suddenly been knocked out from under me. And I, along with all the rest of our people, are realizing that we have got to read and study and find out why we believe what we believe. And if there's nothing more that comes out of this crisis, it's knocking the props out from under our people and forcing them to know why we believe what we believe.
Right. Now, Alan Bloom, who is a professor at the University of Chicago, says that the teaching that has gone on in our schools now for the last 50 years is this relativism. Relativism is necessary to openness, and this is the virtue, the only virtue which all primary education for more than 50 years has dedicated itself to inculcating. And you look at when Dewey took over in the 30s with his influence in our educational system as a result of the influence of the Masons through these organizations which we've been talking about, the impact on education and the American public in breaking up the old allegiances to God, to their family, in a Protestant sense, you see, with God being first. I remember even the person on the street, they wouldn't all be Adventists, but they had a consensus when I was a boy about what was right and what was wrong.
Well, absolutely.
Certain things are right and certain things are wrong. I go back to my hometown now, and there's all kinds of people living together without being married, with kids from who knows who, and the whole moral fabric has broken down.
Totally.
So this can all be documented, what has happened with our educational system. So the taking over, the rewriting of the history books here on page 61 is discussed. The Rockefellers not only used their money to seize control of America's centers of teacher training, they also spent millions of dollars on rewriting history books and creating textbooks that undermine patriotism and free enterprise.
One church member just showed me the American history book of her child in public school, and the reason for the Pilgrims coming to America was to get away from the high taxes of England.
Amazing.
That was the reason that totally this thing of American of religious freedom was cut out. And in our American history books now, the reason that the Pilgrims came to America was to get away from the heavy taxation of England.
Isn't that amazing? He says here on page 61 that the establishments, and when he says establishment, he means the Council on Foreign Relations, what is called the Eastern Establishment, the Council, CFR, the TC, these Masonic influences that we've been talking about. Today, its lock on public education is nearly complete. This fact is evidenced in the number of teacher college heads who belong to the Council on Foreign Relations, including, and he lists a whole slug of our top universities in our nation, from Notre Dame to New York University, Cornell, University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, Brown University, on and on. And then he discusses America's role. He says he was so shocked, he was outraged when he learned about the establishment's lock on the political system. He said a few years ago he had never even heard of the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission. Says after finding out about the establishment's control of mass communication, I was even more appalled, but now at least I understood why I hadn't learned about the conspiracy anymore. See, if you control the media, you know,
absolutely,
then who can find out about all of these things? The Rockefellers controlled every facet of the information industry, from television to public education. Therefore, unless a person comes across one of the citizens groups trying to expose the conspiracy or stumbles onto some aspect of it as I did, there is no way to find out about it. Reflecting on this matter, he says, where does America fit into the plans of the hierarchy? What role has it been destined to play? Reflecting on this matter, I am convinced that America's purpose in the overall plan was to lay the necessary groundwork for the world government. Then, having accomplished this mission to lead humanity to the threshold, if not actually into, the New World Order. Only America, with its record of integrity and leadership as the hero of World Wars I and II, and as the world's policeman in the area of human rights, could accomplish such a feat. President Bush made this point clear in his State of the Union address on January 29, 1991. Here's excerpts from his speech. For 2 centuries, America has served the world as an inspiring example of freedom and democracy. For generations, America has led the struggle to preserve and extend the blessings of liberty. And today, in a rapidly changing world, American leadership is indispensable. Americans know that leadership brings burdens and sacrifices. But we also know why the hopes of humanity turn to us. We are Americans. We have a unique responsibility to do the hard work of freedom. We can find meaning and reward by serving some higher purpose than ourselves, a shining purpose, the illumination of 1,000 points of light. What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind. And then he told of how the world stands now as one. For the first time since World War II, the international community is united. The leadership of the United Nations, once only a hoped-for ideal, is now confirming its founder's vision. And we need to seize this opportunity. The winds of change are with us now. The forces of freedom are together and united. So a new world order, all in the name of freedom and democracy.
Tell me something, Bob. Where should Seventh-day Adventists stand as far as the upcoming presidential election, realizing that George Bush is the one who is instrumental in promoting this new world order? I hate to put you on the spot like this, and I know that we're not to get into politics, advocating any one candidate, but where does this leave us as Seventh Adventists, realizing that our president and the one who is running for re-election is the one who is foremost in putting this one world government, this new world order into place?
Well, I'm not going to get into politics, John, but I will say this from a religious liberty perspective.
Okay.
Here you have this man that you're talking about, Bush, and pushing for a new world order. But look at the rest of the slate. Look at Pat Buchanan.
He's a Jesuit.
Yes. And look at Jerry Brown on the Democratic ticket.
He's a Jesuit.
Jesuit trained, at least. And then you got people like David Duke, who's a neo-Nazi.
You know.
What are we coming to as a nation? You know,
well,
we need to think
as one media person said, that what we're dealing with in this election is the evil of two lessers instead of the lesser of two evils. And you know, that's what we're dealing with. You know, who is the least evil? And it's sad to see the condition that we are in, but to realize that what we are seeing now, what we see George Bush doing, is what we have known as Seventh-day Adventists is going to happen for hundreds of years now. You know, we've been told, not only by our prophet Ellen White, but we can also see it, the proper interpretation of Revelation 13, that this nation was one day going to speak as a dragon, and then she told us here in the latter days that America would be the foremost, and as we knew it was going to happen, and now we see how it's going to happen.
That's
how America is going to do this.
I wish I had time to get into everything here, but I'm just hitting the high points. But notice now the role of the Gulf War. One world government could not be accomplished through a perceived dictatorship. In order to be accepted, the New World Order would have to ride in on the back of what appeared to be a trusted democracy. America filled this description, being viewed as the world's greatest bastion of freedom, the last great hope of mankind. Furthermore, America is the world's largest cosmopolitan nation. Virtually everyone in the world has at least one relative or friend living in the United States. So this goes a long way in alleviating distrust and building a favorable image for the New World Order. The Gulf War, I believe, was only the latest tactic used by insiders to accomplish their goal. And as you just listened to Bush as we were heading into war there, it was quite clear that the main objective was not destroying Saddam Hussein. The main objective was to build a new world order, to use this war as a tool, as an instrument to accomplish a larger purpose of establishing a new world order. And he said the war would accomplish several purposes. It would hike up oil prices, generating billions of dollars for additional revenue for the establishment's oil companies. It would unite the nations of the world against a common enemy, which was necessary to take humanity the final step into a one-world system. And Hussein played the role of the perfect villain, who all decent people like to hate, like Hitler. The war would also establish America as the undisputed leader of the world and the enforcer of the New World Order. And see how that fits in with Revelation 13. showing other countries what they would encounter if they opposed the emerging world system.
Do we ever see that?
It would make true patriots who oppose the concept of a new world order appear to be unpatriotic, while making globalists who supported the UN appear as patriots, essentially turning the tables upside down. And then he comes to the New Age movement. And here he discusses the New Age mysticism and the role of New Age in conditioning the people for this New World Order.
So even this man realizes the tie-in between the Jesuits and down through the history, how they have tried to get into the governments, and how it ties into the New Age that we are having today, and it's just a continuation of this Jesuit agenda to get control of the world?
He's saying basically the same thing we've been saying about New Age, John. He talks about the New Age mysticism, the pantheism of it, and how most pantheists believe automatically
Now he
support...
uses the term pantheism?
Oh, yes. He says the religion of the New Age, simply put, is pantheism.
Because that's what our prophet told us would be the omega of apostasy.
That's right. That's right. He says it's the belief that God is the sum total of all that exists. According to pantheists, there's no personal God. Instead, their concept of God consists of what they refer to as a God force or life force. And this energy or God force flows through all living things, plants, animals, and human beings.
Now, Bob, when I made my first celebration video, I didn't know how, but I knew that somehow celebration tied in to the omega of apostasy foretold by our prophet for the last days. And am I ever beginning to see now a bigger picture? You know, I knew that was from the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit was revealing that to me. I didn't know exactly how, but I just knew it was a part of the omega apostasy. Now we have made the tie-in of how celebration was part of the major Jesuit agenda, and now how that this is also what is involved in New Age and in pantheism, coming right out. That is what the omega, the alpha was, and she said that the omega would be of a much more startling nature, and that this pantheism is the omega of apostasy, which is the Jesuit celebration, New Age, new one world government, New World Order coming into our government and now into our church.
Celebration is a big New Age term, incidentally.
Yes.
Matthew Fox, in his book, The Coming of the Cosmic Christ, has the celebration motif all the way through it.
So
Along
now,
with mysticism,
the Lord is
pantheism.
revealing how, even more, that this celebration is leading into this omega of apostasy.
And think of during the time of Elijah, John. You've often referred to that. In the time of Elijah, you had the Baals that were in the trees,
Yes.
that were in this object of nature or that object of nature, and Elijah had to denounce that.
Yes.
And it's coming around amazingly, so precisely at the end of time
This
to the
is
same
the
picture.
Elijah message. You see, what we are... I wonder if our people realize that what they're hearing on these videos is the Elijah message. I wonder if our dear people realize that. You see, that's what the Elijah message is.
Sure.
It's calling God's people back from apostasy and identifying apostasy. That's what Elijah did on Mount Carmel.
Right. Now, since this God force in the New Age thinking flows through all of us, they rationalize we must therefore be gods, or at least part of God. Because of this belief, most pantheists will automatically support the concept of a one-world government, since global unity is essential to the proper flow of the God force. Now, you know that we're seeing all this ecology business tied in with New Age. And,
oh, yes,
and
Greenpeace.
Yes. Humanity will then presumably take a quantum leap to a higher level of existence. And the result will be that all humans will suddenly receive mystical powers to do what they could never do before. That's why we're seeing this mysticism that Bill Loveless is bringing in, and that the spiritual exercises is bringing into our system.
So even what we see, people running for public office now using this, conservation as a theme for their presidential
like Jerry
candidacy.
Brown.
Yeah, and also Tongass is the same way.
Yeah.
You know, he's the environmental president. He presidential candidate, the environmental candidate, and all of these guys are running on this platform of taking care of the environment and global warming and all that. You mean that plays right into this?
That's all part of it, fundamental to it. And you see, they believe that a new age of enlightenment, a new world order will be born. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was big on this. He said, when we get as a human race to this unified consciousness, then the cosmic Christ, the Omega Christ, will appear. And you see, that's what Matthew Fox, the Dominican scholar, has been writing about, the coming of the cosmic Christ. There has to be radical liturgical change and celebration in liturgy and deep mysticism to bring this about. And we brought out last time about how even our leaders have been involved in attending his seminars, and he cited this as one of the major developments along the line toward the religions getting involved in deep mysticism, which brings them together in deep ecumenism, you see. So ecumenism is all part of this too, you see. That's why the World Council of Churches is very much into these native religions and the Hinduism and all of this. The Jesuit order is very much into this, you see.
Oh, it's all fitting together, Bob.
Pantheism also teaches that we will never die, therefore we must face no personal judgment by God. This is like what Ellen White describes. And, you know, incidentally, Ellen White has chapter after chapter about spiritualism in here, where she's describing the same thing. And relativism is spiritualism, too, because it basically teaches that whatever is right, and God doth not condemn. What's right for you is okay. I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay.
Do you see why our denominational leadership is not promoting the great controversy, and they're trying to stop the independent ministries and crush the efforts of the independent ministries to promote the great controversy? Because the great controversy strikes at the heart of everything our denominational leadership is doing.
Yeah. We just keep coming back in different forms of life in the New Age, an acceptable concept to pantheists, since they believe we're all one with nature. And he discusses pantheism for some paragraphs here. And then he gets into this word mystic or mysticism. Now this is what Bill Lovelace is promoting in our ranks.
Of course.
And the message that apparently is being taken to the seminary students. He said, one of the misconceptions that has thrown people off track and prevented them from making the connection between pantheism and the occult is a misunderstanding of the word mystic or mysticism, at least in its modern usage. New Agers, I found, use the terms mysticism and occultism interchangeably. In fact, the most popular dictionary among New Agers is Neville Drury's Dictionary of Mysticism and the Occult. Time and time again in my research I found these words being used together or synonymously. And so he finally looked up in Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary to see what the word mystic meant. And one of the definitions is, of or relating to mysteries or esoteric rites, the occult. And that's how that all ties in with the Masons. Now, mysticism, as it turns out, is simply a kinder, gentler way of saying occultism. And what has thrown people even further off track is the term New Age, which is even more pleasant sounding, but has come to be synonymous with mysticism and the occult. In modern language, being a New Ager, a mystic, or occultist all means the same thing.
Bill Lovelace called Ellen White Adventist's greatest mystic.
That's right. That's right. And then another dimension of this occultism is the altered state of consciousness thing. Now that's that neuro-linguistic programming from a psychological standpoint. Also, that's why we have so much of the drug use. Now Hitler was deeply into the occult. He was into the drugs. And Alice Bailey, who is the high priestess of the New Age movement, who received the intermediate teaching for New Age, and incidentally, this New Age we covered in the September issue of Freedom's Ring, the whole plan of New Age to usher in the coming cosmic Christ. And we may want to look at that shortly. But her husband wrote a book in which he said that this attempt to found a new world order was attempted by a disciple on the banks of the Rhine, and that was Hitler. He was trying to bring in a new world order. And it's interesting that Constance Cumby, let me get another book here, John.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Constance Cumby. She talks with me on the phone from time to time. In fact, it was Constance Cumby that gave us that article from Mother Jones Magazine last video that Terry Ross covered about the founder of NLP, Richard Bandler.
Yeah. Anyway, she has page after page here in her chapter, The New Age Movement, the Fourth Reich, where she shows the parallels between Nazism, the philosophy of Nazism, and the New Age movement. It's absolutely shocking. And when you begin to tie all this together, you see how Nazism, the Vatican, which we discussed earlier, the Masons, and their tie-in with the CFR and the TC, and the New Age all fit together. There will be one great collaboration, Ellen White says. One great bond of union.
Bob, answer a question for me. I'm a little worried. I've been preaching Daniel 2 all these years in my evangelistic series. Is there going to be a unification of the nations? I've been preaching that there never will be, you know, Daniel 2 and verse 43, they shall not cleave one to another. Is there going to be a short period of time when they will come together? Because if that is the case, then I'm going to have egg all over my face, and so are many other hundreds and thousands of of Seventh Adventist evangelists that have been preaching Daniel 2, they shall not cleave, Daniel 2:43 all these years.
Well, I think Revelation 17 in verses 13 and 14. Well, let's look at verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now, a lot of people have pondered over that. Is that talking about the 10 horns, you know, which we've studied about in Daniel 7, or what is this? But it says that they have not received a kingdom as yet, but they will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. It does at least raise the question in my mind whether this world government with the 10 regions, economic regions, that will give their power to this new world government may be what's being spoken about here.
So
these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So there will be, Ellen White says, a brief period of time where there will be a universal bond of union. We will see this globalism actually come to fruition. We will see the papacy sitting astride the world, using the United States to enforce the Sunday law around the world. We will see attempted uniformity, and we will see this vast brotherhood, this vast great harmony, a confederacy of Satan's forces. And only historic Adventists, biblical Adventists, will stand up against this.
Amen. So we've got 1 hour that they will worship together with the beast, that they will reign together or rule together with the beast. Is that what it says? Rule or reign? Which does it say?
They will receive power as kings.
As kings. As kings. Okay.
One hour
so
with the beast.
if a day in Bible prophecy equals a literal year, then an hour, there are 24 hours in a day. There are 12 months. Half of a month would be 2 weeks. So that means that this will be a 2-week period. For 2 weeks, that's a 24th of 1 year. 24 hours in a day.
Unless this is just a metaphor for a short period of time. Sometimes in the Bible,
I think these things can be pretty literal. I take that as 2 weeks. That these kings are going to rule together with the papacy. So there is going to be, for a short 2-week period of time, when they are going to have this new world order, and it's going to kind of gel for a 2-week period of time, that they will be able to rule.
1 hour, whatever that means. If you take it literally as a 2-week period, or if you take it as...
When it comes to this thing of prophecy, I'm pretty literal, brother.
In chapter 18, Babylon falls in what? How much time? 1 day. Okay, 1 day. And, you know, you could say,
that's a year.
I suppose, a year. But
Ezekiel 4:6.